Welcome to an Introduction to Economics, brought to you by Park-Bench Tutors. This podcast is presented by David Hopcroft and will deal with the concept of elasticity of demand. The idea of elasticity of demand is to try and measure how the demand for a quantity of a particular good X responds when one of the influencing factors is changed. If we were trying to measure a response to a price change, then we would call this the price elasticity of demand. If we were trying to measure a response to income change, we would call it the income elasticity of demand. If we wanted to measure how the demand changed when the price of a related good changed, we would call this the cross elasticity of demand. The general formula for measuring elasticity of demand is to measure the proportionate change in the quantity of good X that is demanded, and to divide this by the proportionate change in price. For the purpose of illustration, we are going to consider the proportionate changes in terms of percentage. Let us suppose that the price of good X rose by 10% and that this was accompanied by a fall in demand of 5%. From the formula we have 5 divided by 10, which gives us a price elasticity of demand of 0.5. Since the result is less than 1, we say that the demand for X is inelastic. This means that a change in price gives a smaller percentage change in demand. Now suppose the price rise was 20%, but the fall in demand was 40%. Then the price elasticity would be 40 divided by 20, which is equal to 2. We say that now the price is elastic, since the percentage change in the price produces an even larger change in the quantity demanded. If the changes were both for the same, then we say there is unitary elasticity. Let us consider some data for price elasticity. The table shows the price of good X, the quantity demanded, and the sales value of achieving this. Now let us see how these figures graph out. If we plot the demand curve, that is, the price against the quantity of time period, then we get a straight line that slopes to the right. Note that the result is not always going to be a straight line. Note too that price is the vertical axis and the quantity per time period is the horizontal axis. Plotting the total sales against the quantity demanded produced a curve. The curve is an indicator of the optimum price to achieve maximum sales value. On a demand curve, price elasticity can only be measured with complete accuracy by considering a point on the curve. This is called the point elasticity of demand. For a straight line, this is determined by taking the price divided by the quantity, P divided by Q, and the change in quantity divided by the change in price, delta Q divided by delta P, which will be the reciprocal of the slope. The minus sign is convention, to show that normally the elasticity of demand is positive. So the elasticity becomes minus delta Q multiplied by P divided by delta P multiplied by Q. For most curves, such as the one shown here, we have to calculate the arc elasticity along the range. The formula for the calculation is shown here. In this formula, P1 and Q1 are the initial price and quantity demanded. P2 and Q2 are the new quantity and price demanded. Again, delta Q divided by delta P is the reciprocal of the slope. Besides price, it is common to consider other factors, such as the availability of alternative goods and the proportion of consumer income spent on the goods. Producers are also interested in how long it takes for the market to respond to a price change. Suppose a change in price causes no change in the quantity demanded. The result is a vertical straight line, and the curve is said to be perfectly inelastic. There are few goods or services that exhibit this, but you might consider that a compulsory license, such as that required for a television receiver in the United Kingdom, represents something that approximates to this. A perfectly elastic demand would produce a horizontal straight line. Economists are interested in income elasticity of demand. This is determined by measuring the proportionate change in the quantity demanded and dividing it by the proportionate change in income. Economists will also be interested in how the price change of a related good affects good X. We term this the cross elasticity of demand. We determine this by measuring the proportionate change in the quantity of good X demanded and dividing it by the proportionate change in the price of the related good. There is a need to take care when we are dealing with figures relating to demand and prices. We shall illustrate this with a simple example. The table illustrates how the price of wheat and the quantity demanded in a given period of time change. These figures can then be plotted as graphs. The result is not a perfect straight line, nor is it a curve. Instead, we have a scatter graph. The economist must now determine the line of best fit, and then determine the accuracy of the graph, or rather, the significance of the data. Such results are not likely to be very useful for determinations of price elasticity of demand. Here are just a few considerations. The longer the period of measurement, the less certain we can be that no other factors are influencing the demand. The price might also be determined to some extent by the supply of good. Wheat can be stored for considerable periods of time, and so the supply to the market may be controlled if the price starts to fall. This ends our short podcast on elasticity of demand, brought to you by David Hopcroft of Parkbench Tutors. Thank you for watching and for listening, and we wish you every success in your studies.